Hello and welcome to another 3-string cigar box guitar video. I'm Sean from Coda Guitar and we are continuing with sort of gear review, gear information type stuff in this series of lessons. So we've already looked at picks, slides, guitars, pickups, so we're continuing on to amplifiers today. Just about to look at sort of basically how a valve amplifier or tube, if you live in the US, amplifier works. Just the sort of different stages that the signal path from the guitar going into the input right through to the output to the speakers, which are down here somewhere. So just before we get on with that, if you like this video, if you like any of the content, please consider either going to the website codatuition.com. There's a link available below, and having a look at any of the scores. They'll accompany most of the lessons on this YouTube channel, so it'd be dead useful for your playing, help support the channel, or if you're not interested in those, you can even consider sending us a PayPal tip, a donation in the tip jar. But yeah, just continuing on, we're going to go straight into a close-up and have a look at this particular amplifier here. Okay, so here's the first amp. This is a 50 watt head, which means it has a maximum output of 50 watts. So we're just going to go through what happens with the signal chain, because the sound comes in here from the guitar. So this is quite a short lead. This is a 3-meter lead, so it's a pretty sort of direct sound of the guitar straight into the amp. And we'll just ignore this particular function just for a minute. This is what we call the preamp stage. So this is the gain. It goes through the EQ. So we've got four band EQ on this particular amplifier, and then we've got a reverb, so we can affect the change the level of reverb. So this particular one has what we call like power scaling, so it can change the number of power amp valves which are working, which determine the output signal or output volume. So I've currently got this down to 1, but I can go through up to four different settings, so I can get up to 4 if you're playing live in a larger room. So I'll turn that back down so I don't annoy people. And then finally we've got the master volume just here. So the signal chain is coming along this direction, and then the master volume is affecting the final output. There's a speaker cable at the back which is connected to the speaker cabinet, which is down there. So basically what happens with all of that? Well, the preamp, as with valves, what they do is they actually heat up, and they sort of amplify signal. It's like a vacuum tube, so they amplify signal, and they typically have a very sort of like warm character to the sound, but they're not actually the most sort of efficient way of transmitting electricity, transmitting current. They actually distort quite easily if you turn them up too loud. So the simplest thing you can do with a valve amp is to just play around with different amounts of gain and different amounts of master volume output. So first of all, turning the gain down and turning the master volume up. So just switch this reverb off actually. So this is foot switchable, so I've just switched the reverb off. Pretty clean there. Now, the preamp valves aren't being overloaded. They're not being overdriven. There's not so much gain going in. There's not so much signal, so it doesn't increase the gain, and therefore they're not distorting the sound. So overdrive, distortion, gain, these are all basically the same, different words for the same thing, just like driving the power, the preamp valves. So if I turn this back down, because I mean I can leave this at the same volume, the master volume, it's just going to get loud. So I'm going to turn it back down, and then I'm going to drive the preamp tubes straight away. We've got some distortion, we've got some gain or overdrive. Okay, so that is where you get your classic rock sound. And in terms of like early blues players, like early valve amps were pretty sort of rudimentary. They didn't have many controls, and I guess, you know, distortion, overdrive kind of happened by accident. They were having to play loud, you know, they're having to turn their amps up so they could be heard, you know, in the clubs in Chicago and elsewhere, and suddenly found out it sounded great. And so, you know, that's where it came from. And I believe Marshall was one of the first amplifiers to fit a master volume on. So that meant that you could change the amount of gain at the preamp stage, and then you could control the overall output. Because say on early Fender amplifiers, they didn't have a master volume, they just had the volume was basically the gain. So if you wanted it to distort, if you wanted overdrive, you had to turn it up loud before you would get that sound. And if anyone's ever played through like 100-watt Fender Twin reverb, you don't want to turn that up to 7. Not unless you're in the house next door or something like that. So so basically the combination of master volume and gain is really useful. Like EQ is, you know, if I put all of these on flat a minute, it's got a few different settings there. You can, you know, you can decide to have more bass. So if you like a sort of jazzy sound, you might want a little bit more bass. This is effectively like two band. It says high, but it's more like sort of high mid, and the presence in this particular amp works more like a sort of high frequency. The EQ works in quite a funny way on this amp. It's kind of slightly subtractive and additive, as opposed to like they affect each other. So I've ended up like having a particular sound where it works to sort of push these buttons in. I'm not entirely sure what they do, to be honest, but just ever so slightly scooped mid. I think that was the previous setting. And that seems to work quite well. But on this particular one, so this is a Matt amp, as you can see. Matt amp were they've been around since the 60s. Like Peter Green from Fleetwood Mac used one back in the 60s, and nowadays they're actually more famous for Matt amp Green, which are very sort of like sludgy, high gain, sort of grunge. You know, sort of metal sounding amps. This particular one's quite versatile, and as well as it's basically a one-channel amp. You can get amps where there's like more than two or more channels, so you can have a clean and then you can have a lead tone coming out the same amp. This one really is one channel, so if I have a lot of gain here, this boost, now this is foot switchable, this boost will it will boost the input stage, the preamp stage, so it will make the gain louder. Whereas if I have less distortion and I boost this, turn this up a little bit again. So this is with the boost on. You can probably hear it's much cleaner. So it's more like a clean boost sound. And the only other thing is reverb. So quite simple. You just turn this on and off. There we go. Now, a sort of true valve amplifier, a full valve amplifier, will have valve-driven reverb. So that's what this one has, basically. So you get a nice warm sound. Okay, so pretty self-explanatory. You quite often get like a standby switch on valve amps because you might want to let them actually warm up a little bit, you know, because the valves work by heating up. That's how they sort of boost the signal, the current. So sometimes people switch them on and leave them on standby for a little bit. Just basically turns the volume off, but you can see that the amp is still on. I can feel it up here. It's definitely on. It's quite warm there. Back again. Okay. There's also an effects loop here, which I'll cover in the next video when we get onto effects. But yeah, basically that's how this particular amp works, and we shall move over to something different.